Hello, everyone. My name is Stacy Leidwinger, and I'm part of the marketing team here at Goliath Technologies. I'm excited to welcome everyone to listen into how to execute successful Citrix or VMware Horizon projects. I'm also joined with our senior technical consultant, Yemi Lady Jew. And in a few minutes, he's going to walk through some real examples of customers where they've leveraged Goliath to really help facilitate projects they have going on around their virtualized apps and desktop environment. Now, before we jump in, I just want to go over a few housekeeping items as well as set expectations. I am going to set a few slides up to really help identify what kind of projects are we talking about, what kind of environments are we working in, and what are the challenges that so many of you are facing. And then I'll spend a minute just highlighting who Goliath is. From there, and where we'll spend most of our time today, we'll walk through 3 specific project scenarios from our customer, showing how leveraging Goliath really set them up for success. And then, as always, we will leave time for Q&A at the end. So all of this will take about 30-45 minutes. Please post any questions you have in the Q&A. We'll try to answer some of them throughout. If not, we'll answer them at the end. There will be a short survey at the end, 3 questions, less than a minute to complete. We'd love to hear your feedback so that we can continually deliver optimal content for your needs. And finally, this question always comes in, can you get the recording? Yes, absolutely. We'll be sending a recording within the next 24 hours. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in. First, I'd like to just briefly introduce Goliath. We at Goliath offer end-user experience monitoring and troubleshooting software with embedded intelligence and automation. With that, we enable IT pros to anticipate, troubleshoot, and prevent performance issues regardless of where IT workloads, applications, or users are located. Now, we do this across industries. Because our products are scalable, we then fit both the price profile and ease of use that is needed across the largest enterprises with 40,000 or more users, as well as smaller SMBs. We do this across verticals, as I said, but we do have a stronghold in the area of healthcare. We have purpose-built modules for major EHR applications such as Cerner, Epic, Meditech, and Allscripts. With these modules, we integrate performance metrics around the user experience from the EHR apps, the end user experience itself and their behavior, as well as the IT delivery structure, which is Citrix or VMware. With all of that information, we help these organizations on this page troubleshoot issues when they come up, as well as prevent them from happening altogether. Now, as we move on to the next slide, one of the things that we're going to really focus on in this presentation is the different projects that our customers leverage us for. All of those logos that you just saw came to us for a specific need. Now, the first, and I'd say foremost, that we often hear from our clients is help us do better and faster troubleshooting so we can isolate the root cause of these issues. What happens is the end user experience has reached a level of such poor performance from slow logons, slow session performance times, that management has been notified that it's derailing their work. It might be patient care and healthcare. It might be the inability for remote workers to do their job because they can't get access to maybe the soft phone they're working. But whatever area it is, that end user experience is inhibiting them to work the way they should work. And that's when we're called in. While this is the use case we're most often called in for, in many ways I feel like it's the saddest because it's reached such a pain threshold that people have an inability to work. Where I think our solution and any that has that focused end user experience monitoring and troubleshooting capabilities can provide the most value is really getting integrated in the beginning of a project so that we are built into the reference architecture and can ensure success throughout. Some examples of this is, for example, in a Windows 10 migration. We did this for many over the past years, and we're still getting called in because there's still quite a few that are still going through the process. And even though it's end of life, they're still struggling on how do we deliver an optimal experience. One of the biggest challenges, there's a lot of tests that you can do in your infrastructure, but still when you actually push live, if you don't have a strong monitoring tool to alert you that there's issues, and we're going to do an example later on, You may not know until a user complains. And at that point, your whole deployment now is at risk because there's a black mark of an issue that's arisen. Another area where we have great focus is really around Citrix or VMware Horizon specific projects. So that might be a brand new deployment. It might be where someone was running a pilot and now they're getting ready to open it up from one office to 10 or 15 different offices or locations. Maybe you're swapping out Citrix for VMware or VMware for Citrix, or maybe you're just looking to upgrade. Many of our, whether it be Citrix or VMware, there's constant upgrade paths. Some are bigger, some are smaller. Regardless of the project, there's always something new being introduced into the infrastructure, and change can have impact on that end user experience. So embedding a technology that is constantly monitoring and looking for and anticipating and preventing issues is absolutely critical to drive success in these rollouts. And finally, a third grouping of projects that we see is really around the ability to move workloads to the cloud. We have quite a few clients that are actually taking their entire Citrix farm or VMware Horizon environment and moving that into AWS and Azure. And so there's a need to not only monitor and troubleshoot the old environment and new, but to actually do it at the same time. So these are all just some of the projects that we get involved in and why people are looking for tools like Goliath. Now, one of the reasons people are looking for tools is that we recognize, with all of you on the phone, your day-to-day is not easy. The environment that exists in IT today is very complex. I just talked about the hybrid nature. You have a lot of applications that are moving to the cloud, that are in the cloud, but still have legacy applications that are going to be on-prem for some time now. And managing that and managing the end user experience that comes with that can be very challenging. Also, work styles have greatly changed over the past few years. Individuals are working any time of day, at any location, any device, and they expect, I'd say demand, that they have the same experience regardless of those factors. And this becomes really challenging when you're trying to isolate root cause of an issue, because users call in and just say, my Citrix is slow. They don't necessarily tell you what device they're on, where they're working, what else was running in the background. There's so many environmental factors that impact the end user experience that without the right tool set, you have no visibility into. The other big factor around all of this is any environment is not just from Citrix or VMware Horizon. There's multiple factors that get into that IT delivery infrastructure. So for example, you've got your licensing server, your Active Directory, your operating systems. You also have your hypervisor layer that you're working with. You've got custom protocols. You've got the applications, your network. You have 15 to 20 different IT elements that are all making up an infrastructure where you're delivering these new projects, and they're probably from 10 to 15 different vendors. So when you talk about just upgrading Citrix or migrating to VMware Horizon, there's a lot of elements that need to change in there, and all of those elements impact the user experience. Now, the other big thing, and I see this happen a lot, especially as new projects come down, is the lack of expertise. Let me just walk you through a scenario, for example. Let's focus on Citrix. Citrix boasts that they have over 400,000 customers. And let's say on average, every customer has 3 Citrix experts to assist with the implementation, the management, the monitoring. This means that there should be over 1.2 million Citrix experts around the globe in demand. In reality, that's the demand. Now, in the supply side, we know that there's 50 Citrix technically certified professionals, CTPs. They get announced every year. Let's say there's even another 5,000, maybe even 10,000 certified experts that have gone through high-end training, have received certifications. That still leaves a gap of almost 1 million Citrix experts. So regardless of how you do the math, there's not enough expertise to assist everyone out there with these projects and these deployments. Lack of demand creates a need to have tools to fulfill that area, fulfill that expertise level. And all of this, because of the projects that are going on, the challenges I just discussed, this is where Goliath comes in. Next slide. As a technology solution, we can serve as your full-time end user experience troubleshooting expert, available 24/7 by 365 days out of the year, and require no training and have no downtime. We don't even need a manager. More importantly, we can also automatically anticipate and prevent issues before they occur. So by working with a tool like Goliath into your virtualized desktop or application environment and those projects that we discussed, you can ensure that you not only can isolate root cause of issues when they arise, but you can prevent them altogether, leveraging the out-of-the-box alerts that we offer. We can do this and serve as your troubleshooting expert because of three core areas in our software, and you're going to see this in a minute. The first is our embedded intelligence and automation, which actively monitors over 250 key conditions, events, and failure points that automatically alert your team before end users are impacted with a negative end user experience. Secondly, we offer deep and broad metrics across all of your IT infrastructure, as well as end user behavior. And if you're a healthcare organization, we also include, as I mentioned earlier, all major EHR apps. And we're the only troubleshooting tool for end user performance that has these purpose-built modules for EHR applications so that we can isolate root causes of things like Cerner is slow or Epic is slow. And finally, and you're going to see this in the demonstrations, we offer historical reports and analytics that drive and foster data-driven conversations across your IT team, with the vendors, with management, and end users themselves. And this is a key differentiator for Goliath, as we store and share historical data so that you can look at trends and actually respond with factual evidence when your users complain that their system is slow, or they're actually talking about issues as you roll out new projects in their environment. You have evidence of, is the end user experience worse or better from before? These reports are critical when you're rolling out something new. So now with this context, I'm going to turn it over to Yemi, who's going to walk through three specific project areas and really talk about how Goliath can help. And actually, I lied. You don't lose me for one more slide. I'm going to set this one up for Yemi. So this is the example of upgrades that I talked about. Here we're going to call out Citrix, for example, as an upgrade example. Many of you on the phone have probably already made the big leap from 6.5 to a 7.x branch. That was a huge leap, and it had a lot of impact on end user experience. But some of you still maybe have not yet made that leap. Regardless of where you sit, you are going to or are dealing with the challenge of, do you go on a long-term service release with Citrix? And you might be doing that because you lack expertise. And so you can only work with consultants and others to upgrade every so often. Maybe your environment is not akin to change, and you know that these are always going to be heavy lifts. So you're only going to upgrade when you absolutely have to. So you're minimizing your risk by having that stable version. Now, in this case, every time you go to upgrade, there is going to be more change, more environmental factors, more capabilities to build in. And with that change, you need a strong solution that's going to allow you to monitor and troubleshoot across the two environments. Or maybe you're one of these customers that really like to have the latest and greatest, and you're waiting for fixes or new enhancements that you've asked Citrix for. In that case, you're on a current release. And in that area, you're constantly upgrading, which means you really need to be monitoring that as you upgrade every 3 months, perhaps, your end user experience remains steady and consistent. So regardless if you're looking for a major upgrade, or you're on a long-term service release, or you're on a current release framework, there's that constant change and influx that's happening. And you need to have a third-party tool that's going to allow you to keep an eye on that end user experience and make sure, regardless of the changes you're making in your core infrastructure, your end users are not impacted, and they can have a consistent and high-performing experience. So Yemi, why don't you take us into a customer example now as we talk about this upgrade scenario?
Absolutely, I think, and thanks, Stacy, for setting that up so well. So the first scenario that we're going to be talking about today is something that I think most of us are familiar with, upgrading from one version of Citrix to another, right? Upgrading to, in this particular case, this customer was upgrading from, I think, 7.6 to 7.15, the LTSR version. And if we talk about sort of hybrid scenarios and things like that, this particular customer had infrastructure on-prem, so they had on-premises VMware infrastructure, as well as a lot of VDAs that they built specifically for this Citrix upgrade, the VDAs were in AWS. So there's a hybrid infrastructure, and they needed to really track the adoption of the new 7.15 environment because, as you can imagine, in an environment like this, there are some issues and tickets being opened by end users about some end user experience issues, specifically with logon times. So they wanted to make sure that with this new environment, that those performance issues don't stall the adoption and sort of have a bad taste in the user's mouth. So they leverage our technology, and what they were able to do is they were able to track end user experience and track all of the delivery infrastructure in one single view, as well as be able to troubleshoot issues as quickly as possible in both environments to be able to ensure that the rollout process went well. So, I'll show you, I can jump right into the technology and talk about how this customer was actually able to do that, leveraging the Goliath solution. So, I know we talk a lot about embedded intelligence and automation, and that typically starts as soon as you deploy our technology. So right now what we're looking at is the automatic discovery and dependency map for Citrix. And this is typically segmented out based on the different Citrix sites you have, different farms, so on and so forth. But in this particular customer's case, they were able to then, this technology mapped out the entire delivery infrastructure for both the old environment and the new environment, showed them exactly how components were connected to each other, where there are problems in the architecture, and then in both cases added over 300 monitoring rules to the environment. These monitoring rules are monitoring for conditions, failure points, thresholds, and events that actually can cause end user experience issues. So from this view, they were able to come over here and flip back and forth between both sites. So at any point, they can flip back to a different particular site or a particular Citrix farm and see in real time a live updating view showing them the health of the environment. So you can see here all of the components are green, but as issues take place on any one of these components, they start to turn orange or red depending on the severity, so they could see in one view what's actually impacting user experience. So at a whole, they were able to, sort of click through as issues start to come up. They were able to identify, it looks like there's some delivery controller resource issues that they needed to address, and they were able to see that by some of the alerts triggering on the delivery controllers. They also had the ability to drill down into the delivery layer. They identified some under-provisioned delivery groups that they needed to take a look at, and they were also able to drill down into specific delivery groups and tie it back to the underlying infrastructure, whether it's for the on-premises VDI environment or even some of the VDAs that were inside of AWS. So this gave them a holistic view of the components and performance of those components and how they impacted user experience for both farms, enabling them to help the adoption. Now, of course, this is a 50,000-foot view. This is a sort of a macro view showing you overall performance of the entire environment. But they also needed to be able to troubleshoot individual issues when it came to logon times. Individual issues where, a particular user may be connecting in to the new environment and experience some sort of a delay, and it wasn't sort of an infrastructure-specific delay, but they needed to be able to drill down into an individual session so that they can figure out exactly what was taking place. So that's when they flipped over here to the Citrix virtual apps and desktop session display. And this is where all of the sessions in the environment populate. And here they're able to see all of the, the sessions, whether it's the on-prem sessions for the old and for the 7.6 environment as well as the 7.15. They're able to quickly isolate the sessions that were affected, click on those sessions, and they now get a pop-up of about 7 or 8 tabs giving them all the information they need to troubleshoot any issue within that session. And specifically, they were looking into the logon time. So here, they saw a high-level breakdown of the summary here. They click down on that particular page, and now they get details into each stage of the logon process for this user, what's going on at the delivery controller, what's going on at Citrix receiver. And at the bottom, they were able to take a deeper look into different sections of the entire logon process for this user. And then in that case, they were able to identify that they had some group policies that weren't sort of correctly set up. Specifically, they were mapping to drives that were decommissioned and things like that. So they were able to identify the policy, the individual policy that was causing those delays, and they were able to sort of collapse the troubleshooting time frame, focus on fixing that policy, which in their case was just to remove that policy, instead of looking for the different tools and different consoles, looking at different tools and consoles to be able to find the root cause of those particular issues. So in this case, they were able to get a holistic view of both environments and all those components that impact the delivery of Citrix in both environments, as well as they had the ability to drill down into each individual session to troubleshoot issues and make sure that users adopt this new environment without any problems. So with that, we're going to jump into the next scenario. And this is something that I think Stacy touched on again, which is, with the end of life of Windows 7, a lot of our customers are now, or a lot of, Citrix environments are now, rolling out Windows 10. And there are a lot of different things that come up, in those environments. You have to be able to test and make sure, again, that there's adoption of these platforms, and that users don't get a bad taste in their mouth, because a lot of times we hear that the initial impression of a new software or a new platform, it takes a long time to sort of get that poor experience out of the user's mind. So this particular scenario, we have a home healthcare provider, and they have over 30 locations in the United States. And this is a completely on-prem environment. So they have VMware as their virtual infrastructure, and they're delivering a EMR application, so a very patient-critical application via Citrix virtual desktops. So in this case, they're rolling out Windows 10 because of the Windows 7 end of life, and they deploy our technology in that beginning stage to make sure that they can monitor in real time the environment, make sure that user experience is good in the testing environment. So after sort of months of testing, everything seemed to be good, and they were going to go through and actually push this out to production and roll this out to all of the users. And then Goliath started triggering some alerts, specifically with their write cache filling up very quickly. So this was a sort of PVS environment, and they're delivering desktops, of course. This then allowed them to halt the move to production, and then focus on sort of remediating those issues. This is an example of how the embedded intelligence and automation of a purpose-built tool like Goliath was able to identify these sort of issues, alert the team proactively before they actually went out and deployed this and had these users experience these sort of issues in this new environment. So I can talk quickly about how this particular customer was able to do that or leverage the technology to do that. But I wanted to point out quickly, though, that all of the stuff that we went over in the first scenario with the topology view or the automatic discovery and dependency map view, as well as the ability to drill down into those test sessions, this particular customer leveraged. But they also, particularly in that rollout phase, leveraged the monitoring rules that I mentioned earlier, right? So over 300 out-of-the-box monitoring rules. Some of them they have to send that are sending out email alerts. Some of them they just have to aggregate and collect inside of the technology. But they leverage these rules to be able to get alerted to issues impacting any end user experience or user experience in their environment. And that's how they were able to sort of identify those issues. Now, in their case, they were having a write cache issue, but here you can actually see some of the alerts that come out of the box of the technology. I can select a particular alert here. I can then take a closer look at it, and you can see you can set up threshold-based alerts. You can also they also had the ability to sort of trigger remediation actions and things of that nature. So the embedded intelligence and automation of the technology really drove them to be able to be alerted to issues impacting performance before users experience them, so that they can get ahead of those issues and fix them and limit sort of those issues impacting the users. The final scenario that we'd like to talk about today, we had a local credit union here in Pennsylvania, and they had a Citrix virtual apps and desktop environment as well. They also had some, VMware, or they were using Citrix hypervisor, and obviously they were moving to VMware Horizon, and they were going to implement a new technology to replace Citrix. The reason they were replacing Citrix is because for years they were having issues with performance, and they felt like the only way that they could sort of change the user's perspective of their IT department and of the environment was to roll out a brand new, or to make some changes. So they decided that they were going to go with VMware Horizon. So this customer, they wanted the ability to proactively and preemptively test for the availability of the resources that they're publishing, whether they are VDI as well as RDSH sort of applications. And because of sort of the issues that they were having before when they had Citrix, where users would try to log in and not have access to the resources, they felt like they were reliant on users to report these sort of issues, and they did not want that to happen for the Horizon environment, because they could see how much pain those users were experiencing, and how that could taint or stall the project as a whole. So with that, they deployed a portion of our technology that serves as an early warning system. And how it's typically deployed is there's a Goliath central console that is typically deployed inside of the data center. And then there are sort of virtual users that are deployed at, typically it's on a virtual machine or a workstation, a laptop, at each one of the different locations that users are located. And what's actually taking place from those locations on that laptop or something like that, there's sessions being created 24/7, 365. So here they're starting blast sessions or PC over IP sessions, and they're testing the entire delivery infrastructure, making sure that all of the VMware components are working correctly, as well as the back-end systems that typically would be outside of VMware. So you have, your Active Directory or your profile servers and things of that nature, and also testing, making sure that provisioning works correctly. And this is happening 24/7, 365. It's typically happening, it's happening before users start their workday, so that if there is an issue with any step of the process that results in users not having access to whatever resource that is being published, IT now gets a real-time alert, and then they have the ability to get ahead of these issues and try to fix them before users are impacted. This effectively is getting them out of the business of relying on users to report these sort of issues, and taking a more proactive approach to to resource availability. So if, let's say, they had a real-time alert, they now had the ability to jump over to this portion of the technology here, which is the Application Availability Analysis tab, to troubleshoot these issues, or to understand what's actually taking place from those environments or from those different launch points. So this is sort of the central management and monitoring console for all of those launches taking place across the entire environment. And this page is broken down into two sections. There's a top section showing a high-level dashboard of all of the launches taking place across the environment, with the blue bars representing average launch time. And then the trend line here is overall availability. And this customer has the ability now to go back and see, filter based on date range, based on the locations that they're launching applications and desktops from. And they can also filter based on the applications and desktops that they were launching. They also, now at the bottom of the screen, had the ability to troubleshoot issues as they take place across the environment. So typically they would look at this bottom section when they've gotten an alert saying, okay, it looks like one of these applications supposed to be launched from this particular location has failed. So now they can see the date and time, the application or desktop that was being launched, where it was being launched from, and ultimately whether that launch was successful or if it failed. And then if it did fail, they can see exactly at what stage it failed. So they had the ability to then sort of get ahead of this issue, first of all, and they have now an idea of where to troubleshoot these issues. Now, this is in the VMware Horizon environment, but it works the same way. They actually have the ability to click on any one of those failures, and they now get screenshots of each step of the process. So they have the ability to see what error message would actually present to the user in this case. Now giving you that final objective evidence to go through, collaborate with whatever teams that are needed to be able to solve these issues and limit user impact as a whole. So it's with that that I'd like to transition over to the historical reports and analytics. Taking a proactive approach to sort of rolling out and identifying issues within the rollout process, whether that's with Citrix, VMware Horizon, whether that's with the Windows 10 or any other technology that are being deployed into an environment. Customers leverage these reports because this gives you the data needed to get you out of the business of relying on users to report to users to sort of report issues, as well as as we all know, users are sort of very apathetic, inconsistent. Now this is the objective information to show the performance of the environment. So some of the more popular ones that are being used, especially during the VDI or any project rollout process, would be the license usage report. We have this both for Citrix and Horizon, just being able to understand how licenses are being used inside of the environment, peak times based on delivery groups or farms or so on and so forth. Another one is logon duration reports, specifically, in the new environments like Horizon or Citrix, where you have group policies and you have different logon scripts and things like of that nature being deployed and tested. You now have the objective evidence to see on average how these sort of new initiatives or these new pieces are actually impacting the logon process for your users, as well as here's one that shows logon times based on stage as well as session count, but this is more of a graphically intensive report. So customers leverage these just to make sure that during that process they're able to smoothly roll out any project that needs to be rolled out. So with that, I'll pass it back over to Stacy to close us out, and then we'll do some questions.
Great. Thank you, Yemi. And as Yemi said, if you have any questions, please submit in the Q&A box. We already have a few here, so keep them coming. As you just saw demonstrated by Yemi, really focused on project scenarios, is that with Goliath's ability to monitor and troubleshoot that end user experience, you can really go ahead and help anticipate, troubleshoot, and prevent performance issues, regardless of where your users are located, regardless of where the workloads are, regardless of the application, to really drive success. And key element of driving that success is the embedded intelligence and automation. So Goliath was originally founded as a consulting organization, and we took that years of intelligence and we built it into the product. So when Yemi shows you all of those out-of-the-box alerts, which can notify you when things like the right cache is filling up or other issues are about to happen, we did that based on the intelligence that we've had sitting in your shoes out there and putting it into the product. So as I said earlier, it's almost like when you use Goliath, you've augmented your team by a full FTE that is solely focused on finding and anticipating these issues and helping you resolve them as fast as possible. And we do that by providing you that single pane of glass for an end-to-end visibility across all elements of the end user experience, from all the IT delivery infrastructure elements that Yemi just walked through, from the end user activities and behaviors that they have, recognizing that they might be running a large audio file, or recognizing they have an issue plugging in a peripheral device. And then if you're in healthcare, again, our purpose-built modules for all major EHR apps allow you to have that view. And this holistic view really can drive success from the beginning of your projects, throughout the rollout of your projects, all the way through the end. And so really, as you're starting to engage on whether it's a net new project or there's just challenges that you're experiencing around the end user experience, I really welcome the opportunity to talk more with you, potentially sign up even for a free trial, and see how we can ensure that you have success throughout these projects. So with that, let's move on to the Q&A. Yemi, first question we have is, we are moving our Citrix farm from on-premise to AWS. First, does your technology work with AWS? And two, have you ever helped anyone with this type of project?
That's a really good question, and to answer the question, absolutely, yes. Our technology is able to, give you a holistic view of the entire environment and user experience, regardless of where the workflows are located. And that's what I think in the first example, where there was a hybrid infrastructure, where there's on-prem as well as AWS, and we have a number of customers that use Goliath to fully migrate or manage the migration process all the way from the on-prem environment to AWS and Azure. So our technology does function, does work regardless of where the workloads are located. And that is exactly how a lot of our customers leverage our technology to be able to manage that process as well.
Perfect. Next question. Have you ever proven that it was, for a remote employee, it was their home Wi-Fi or another Wi-Fi network issue that was the root cause of slowness?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's something that that customers leverage our technology, to do on a weekly or daily basis. I can actually flip over to a portion of the technology that might give you a little bit of context to whoever asked that question. So within our session display, once you've isolated an individual user session, right from the summary tab, which is the first tab that shows up, we actually show the round trip time here, but we take it further into network latency, real-time network latency, as well as the connection speed, which is the available bandwidth that the user has for Citrix or Horizon at their user's endpoint. So wherever they're connecting in from, their home office or Starbucks or plane, you're able to see how much bandwidth they have for that Citrix or for Horizon session, which really gives you that ability to point to performance issues at their location, causing performance issues inside of their session.
Thank you, Yemi. Where and how are your agents deployed?
So yeah, we do have a lightweight intelligent agent that typically is deployed into the infrastructure. So in a Horizon environment, it'd be your connection server, if you have a security server, things like that. And in Citrix, it'll be a delivery controller, storefront servers, PBS and things like that. And they're also deployed on the machines that are going to be hosting sessions in the environment, regardless of Citrix or Horizon. And that's typically all we need to be able to get the user experience information to map out the entire environment and things like that. So our agents are lightweight, really lightweight. They're about about 1.5 meg in size. They use up 0.1% of a CPU core, so really, really lightweight, but they enable us to get the deep metrics that we do that enable customers to troubleshoot.
Perfect. And there's another one that kind of relates to that, is how long does it take normally to implement your solution?
That's a good question. I think for the most part, we see things on average, it takes about, 90 minutes. So we typically on installation, stand up, if the servers are ready or set up for the infrastructure, it's, just go through the product, configure the product, and set up monitoring rules and things of that nature. So it really takes about 90 minutes. And then from there, we then focus a lot of resources on training and fine-tuning the environment to make sure that it's very actionable, and the users are equipped to be able to troubleshoot issues in the environment when they need to.
Great. This is a two-part question, Yemi. One was, can you share any lessons learned from these customers that had these projects? And secondly, do you know if there was any due diligence and assessments done before kicking off the project?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Obviously each environment is very different, but lessons learned for sure would be, first of all, being able to have the alerts, the alerts functionality and the embedded intelligence of the technology driving multiple different screens really allowed a lot of these customers to be able to be proactively and preemptively alerted to issues beforehand, and then also the historical reporting that for the most part you have users, or you have a Citrix team that is separate from the infrastructure team and the networking team. So the historical evidence and reporting really helped collaborate, or helped the collaborative process between these different teams that are all in some way, shape, or form involved in helping these projects actually be successful. And what was the second question, Stacey?
It was asking around, was there due diligence or assessment done for these projects? So my thought was, Yemi, probably having worked with these customers, I don't think we probably don't know all of the due diligence and assessment, but I know there was baselining done really to help initiate a few of these when we were involved early on. Maybe talk about what we can do from a baselining perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, leveraging the historical reporting when it comes to baselining. When you're rolling out rolling out a new version of Citrix or Windows 10, typically customers would like to understand what performance looks like in the environment before they add in this new technology. So they want to be able to understand, well, am I adding technology into an environment that's already poor? Even though we know, and obviously in those cases, then the new technology is going to be blamed for those performance issues when really the environment was just poor in the first place. So baselining performance before the rollouts is another way that our customers are able to leverage the technology in these projects.
Mm-hmm. And since you mentioned reporting, one of the questions we have is, how long do you keep your data for your report?
That's a question we get a lot, and the answer is simply how long would you like to keep the data for? We give you the ability to determine how long you keep any information. We don't average or roll up any information either, so you get granular reports for how long you need to, whenever you would like. We also give you the ability to determine how long you keep certain data points. So maybe user experience metrics are really valuable, but maybe not so much when it comes to the event logs or process monitoring, and you can sort of adjust those different time periods depending on your use case.
Great. And one last question, unless any others come in. How are you different from Citrix Director?
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, I think when it comes down to the difference between a tool like Goliath or and Citrix Director, it really is the fact that Director is a good tool for disqualifying Citrix, right? It sees all of the Citrix components and it allows you to see or to tell if Citrix is the root cause of these or Citrix is the problem. However, you know, there are a lot of different components that actually impact Citrix. There's the domain controllers, there's group policies, there's SQL. All of these other components impact Citrix, and either way, Citrix is going to get blamed for it. So our technology monitors all of those, monitors the Citrix components as well as those other components that impact Citrix in one single view, giving you as IT the ability to identify where those issues are taking place, as opposed to just disqualifying Citrix or not.
Well, great. Well, thanks, Yemi, and thank you everyone on the phone. Like I said, if after this presentation you are looking to get a free trial, or we'd be happy to walk through some of the specific scenarios that relate to the projects you have on your docket coming on, please email us at techinfo@goliathtechnologies.com. Thank you, Yemi, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.